What was it that got you interested in work in the metaverse? How did it
Yeah,
start?
I'll take you back a little bit. So I've been working remotely for a long time, for a lot of my career. Even
Yeah.
pre-pandemic, I was a remote worker. And when the pandemic hit and other people started becoming remote workers as well, I actually felt a little bit more like I belonged in a way, rather than just me being a screen in someone's office. Everybody was a screen. So that was in a way quite positive for me. But I have always hated video calls. For many years, I have disliked them deeply. And I think we've been more and more reliant on them for the past 18 months, 2 years. And they just don't feel very natural to me. It's a super unnatural way to communicate. You're looking at this Brady Bunch grid of, and you're trying to see what people's facial expressions
Yeah.
are like. You can't quite
Yeah.
work it out. And then you're trying to look at yourself and make sure you haven't got food on your face. It's just horrible. I hate them. I'm trying not to look at myself right now. I started asking people if video calls, because nobody really likes them. I'm yet to meet someone that's like, yeah, video calls, love them, great, let's
Yeah.
do them all day.
Awesome. Yeah.
So I asked people, so why are we still using them? And when I ask that, people tend to say two things. They say it's the best we've got,
Yeah.
and it's the closest we can get to real life. So this got me thinking, is this really the best that we have with all of the technology of today? And then what's so good about real life anyway? I do some work at Epic Games, and we're all about the imagination and pushing the boundaries of what's possible and allowing people to create and think about other worlds and what they can do in different spaces, different worlds. And yet when it comes to workplace communication, not specifically where I am, but just in general, we just go, okay, let's set a video call. And who said that workplace communication had to be boring is really, one of the questions that I ask. So I got thinking about this, and of course, pandemic hit, and then I was like, no, this is really, really timely now. And so I said, right, I'm going to jump into this PhD. So I'm working on this PhD looking specifically at creativity in workplace, in the workplace, in virtual environments, in the metaverse, because I think creativity is a key driver, of course, of innovation. We've got a lot of problems that we need to solve, regardless of what industry you work in. We have problems that need solving, and we can't do that without innovation, without creativity. And as our teams become more distributed, as remote work becomes far more normal, we need that element. So, that's why I think this was so important for me to do.
Thank you very much for that, Jo. That's something that resonates with me so much as well. Hating video calls and spending your whole life on them now, I suppose, to a certain extent, but also that I suppose that there are good things about video calls, that we can have this conversation now. And
I would never trash them.
Yeah.
My job for the past almost 10 years wouldn't have been possible without it. So it's amazing. It's just
Yeah.
not the best.
Exactly. What's the next thing? And how do you see the metaverse changing that in the workplace? How do you envision it? What would it look like?
I think when we think about work in the metaverse, that we've got to define two things there, right? We've got to define the metaverse, which in itself is we've got to define what we're talking about when we say work. So
yes,
I think many people use metaverse and virtual reality synonymously, and I don't think that's correct.
yes.
But I do see, of course, VR as being a really powerful conduit, a really powerful way to access spaces within the metaverse, because then you get that immersiveness that is really unique to the metaverse. And then, of course, when we talk about workspaces, well, just as in the real world, we've got all sorts of different kinds. So doctors have a very different space to accountants and to teachers, and so we all have our own needs and the likes. But when we talk about like your average information worker who traditionally works from an office, I think the promise of the metaverse is not, as many have said, about recreating our workplaces or providing digital twins of our offices. It's more about this taking advantage of this huge opportunity that's in front of us. And that is to entirely reimagine our workspaces. So, for example, we know from lots of research that very stark corporate boardrooms aren't very conducive to team creativity. So let's not make those if you're trying to if
you want the creativity.
Yeah, I think we need to take a step back and ask ourselves what we really need from these spaces. We need productivity, sure. We need creativity so that we can drive that innovation I mentioned. We need the ability to be alone as well and have that reflective time as much as we need to be with others. So really, I think the sky is the limit, or the metaverse is the limit. And we don't need to rely on these old world paradigms that we think about when we think about what a workplace is.
Yeah. Okay. So you're talking about like not too skeuomorphic, where you're just taking the normal world and making it digital. So it's like a complete kind of reimagining of it. And how do you think, what would be the effects for people in their home working? So like, say I'm working from home at the moment, what would be, how would that improve as opposed to this video call? Would I be more immersed? Would I be more involved with people? What do you think the difference would be?
So from a purely practical point of view, I believe that now a lot of companies, a lot of organizations are fairly well set up to provide their employees with VR headsets, the same way that traditionally you may be provided just with a laptop.
Yeah.
The price is coming down. Logistically, it's still challenging, especially depending on the country you live in. It's quite difficult sometimes to get a headset to you. But that, if there's a need, if the market is there, that will be worked out.
Yeah.
And then there's a few things here that I can think of that as an individual you may benefit from. So first, just the general immersiveness of VR and in the metaverse can really help with a focused attention. So you don't have the email pop-ups, you don't have push notifications on your phone. You can completely define the kind of environment you want to be in. So if you need that focus time, you've got it. So definitely fewer distractions. I think one of the big things when I speak to other remote workers is we often have that feeling of isolation and loneliness.
That's really something that I was thinking about, like the virtual. I mean, that's what you miss with the workplace, I suppose, is that connection with people, and how the metaverse could create that.
Right. No, exactly. And I miss it. I missed it so much that I've created the most ridiculous channels on Slack just to try and find that connection. Like I'm quite an extrovert. I like talking to people, and I like talking
the same
about work. I've done some really silly things though, like set up Pictionary competitions, and then I realized that I'm working with some of the world's best 3D artists. So I'm like, that's a really bad idea, Joe.
And they're really, really good at Pictionary.
really, really good at it.
Yeah, that's brilliant.
But with VR, you could do so much more. Informal connection. You've just got that feeling of co-presence, and psychologically, our brains don't know the difference between co-presence in VR and co-presence in reality. It's the same thing psychologically. So we can feel together even when we're not. So that's definitely a big thing. And I think the other thing is that traditionally we've used things like corporate retreats to break ourselves away from the day-to-day and the normal rigmarole of the working day. And you can do that in an instant with virtual reality. So you can plan a little team retreat at a minute's notice. Go and have a brainstorm on top of Kilimanjaro if you want.
It would make meetings interesting if you had them in outer space and the bottom of the ocean and Kilimanjaro and whatnot.
And I know some of my colleagues who they've held some client meetings in like Red Dead Redemption and stuff, which is really you're
so cool.
Chatting to clients, and that's really cool, and it's just kind of next level when you do it in an immersive environment.
And it links as well to what you were talking about with creativity, because I think that level of flexibility and composability, and that you can kind of add to it, creates for people working in that environment in information kind of industries. It makes sense. It kind of adds up that would be the environment you work in and what you're creating. And so I'm just super excited about that. It's really interesting. And so just one last question, and I really appreciate the really good answers you've been giving me. This one, what do you think, what kind of work opportunities do you think there'll be in the metaverse for people? Is there any ideas you have on that in terms of where people would work in the metaverse or work on the metaverse? I don't know if there's any ideas.
Interesting distinction actually, in and on. But I won't necessarily break that up right now because we can be here all day. I suppose is that people will be able to do everything they currently do better and more. So to take some examples from our previous evolution of the internet, the Web 2.0, this brought the era of social media in, and of course social media brought around so many different kinds of new jobs, different industries. And I think Web 3 and the metaverse is going to do the same. So I think marketing is already there. I don't like to blow our own trumpets, but we're already quite ahead of the curve there. Marketing's already thinking about
Yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, yeah. No, I was just saying we're somewhat trying to get there, figuring it out. But
Definitely,
yeah.
definitely ahead of the curve. So
Mhm.
marketing is really trying to already like position their clients, position brands so that they can be seen in the metaverse, and not just simply seen in terms of your product placement and your advertising, but also providing those more experiential and immersive experiences for their customers.
Yeah.
So that's something that's going to continue to grow.
Mhm.
Another one, of course, is world building. The world building is going to be absolutely fascinating. It's huge.
Yeah.
Somebody's got to build these spaces out, and there's lots of different ways of doing that.
Yeah.
Uh, Working with people in Epic and Unreal Engine, for example, that's something that they're very focused on.
Mhm.
And the creator economy is already here now, but because of how can we put it? Because it's social media is somewhat monopolistic, and Web 2.0 is leans towards that side. Creators
Yeah.
perhaps aren't truly able to own what they create.
Yeah.
And my hope is that the metaverse will provide ways for creators to share and sell more
Mhm.
freely. So
Yeah.
whether you're a musician, an artist, a developer, or writer, or just someone with an idea,
Mhm.
and that's my hope. And I think that smart metaverse companies are really setting themselves up in a way that will completely democratize the creation in the metaverse.
Yeah.
So rather than company X providing a meta world, if you like,
Yeah.
it's rather about company X empowering others to create the worlds that they want and the experiences that they want. And I think that's where the really exciting stuff's going to happen.
That there's a fabulous opportunity. That's a great link there as well between the creator economy and the kind of metaverse world and the decentralizing kind of aspect of it as well. And
Yeah,
as you
the
said,
decentralization is going to be really interesting to watch.
amazing for creators and artists. And there's so many creative people, I suppose, at the moment that are really gonna, build that world that everybody's gonna inhabit.
And if
Um,
there's one thing I've learned, I'm speaking on this exact topic at TEDx Cape Town in a couple of weeks. And if
yeah.
there's one thing I've learned through this process is that everybody has an idea and everybody has things that they can create. And it's just about finding the right way for you to do that. And these companies need to be able to empower and offer spaces for people to be able to share their ideas and share their creations with the world, with the metaverse. And that's where we're going to see some amazing things happen.
Brilliant. Thank you. That was God, we could do this all day, but in terms of for your talk at the Enter the Metaverse conference that's happening now on December 2nd, December 3rd, what's the topic of it, and what message do you want people to leave with about the metaverse? What is it that you want to teach them?
So when we think about the metaverse, I want people to think about how we can use this amazing opportunity that's in front of us to completely reimagine our workplaces and to reignite our very human creativity that is very easily lost. So that's what we're going to look at. And my background is both in marketing communications, but it's also in anthropology as well, in human communication, human connection. So there'll definitely be a little bit of an element of that without getting too theoretical. And I want people to be inspired to think big with this. I want people to, anyone that leads a team, anyone that has people they need to connect with, I want them to just jump down that rabbit hole, follow that white rabbit, nice little matrix.
Yeah, yeah.
Follow that white rabbit and go to amazing places in the metaverse with their